and the land is dark, and the moon is the only light we'll see.
If you've got the cash, this is now the only way to travel.
To get into your big 4x4, it gives you a feeling of safety. It makes you feel strong.
Just as long as you
But the four-wheel drive is more than just the new star of the school run.
so darling,
Big trucks, that's the new jewellery of hip-hop. Not really right unless you're sitting on 24 inches in a big truck.
oh, stand by me.
But they're not always as safe as we're led to believe.
If the sky
When it really comes down to it, what you're doing here is you're exchanging dollars for human lives.
Will this growing love affair prove to be a fatal attraction? In just 20 years, the four-wheel drive, known in America as the Sports Utility Vehicle, or SUV, has become a success story that has transformed the fortunes of the car industry worldwide. 1 in 4 Americans now own an SUV.
Well, we like the SUV because it holds a lot of gear and it's comfortable and we can see from up high.
I love my SUV because it gets me everywhere I need to go, and it's very dependable and it never breaks down.
Because they're manly.
Manly, huh?
Manly. And the chicks dig them.
Gotta go.
These gas-guzzling monsters symbolize the wealth and power of modern America. But with growing concerns about the environment, the SUV has become a political battleground.
AM 640, more stimulating talk radio.
Johnny Jim on the 405. You're on the John and Ken Show.
I believe I have the moral obligation to protect my family. That includes when we're driving.
We're in LA, people are driving trucks instead of cars. It's bizarre.
My moral obligation says to put them in the safest car that I can possibly find.
I don't like the pollution, but I also don't like the fact that they're designed in such a way that they have caused a sort of an arms race on the highway.
So where did the vehicle at the heart of this battle come from? The answer lies in a much earlier conflict.
Out of the misty Pacific skies, like tiny locusts, they swarmed in from the sea. With the sky and sea all their own, at 7:55 a.m., hell broke loose. Man-made hell, made in Japan.
After the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor in December 1941, America entered World War II. Even before Pearl Harbor, the US government had seen the need to create a new type of vehicle to cross any terrain.
Can this be an automobile, men wondered? Looks more like a four-wheel Beetle, one of them said.
Ah, the Jeep. Great memories about the Jeep. I was born in 1934, and the Willis Overland, that was the parent company of the Jeep, was in business. My sister used to work at the swing shift at the factory in Toledo, Ohio. And then World War II broke out. 1942 is when this Jeep was born. Kind of a bumpy ride. And you can imagine if there were grenades being tossed at you.
The Jeep was the world's first mass-produced four-wheel drive. It was revolutionary at a time when the Allies badly needed a little extra help.
The vehicle that went into World War II was called a general-purpose vehicle. General purpose, fine, but it began to be, that shortened to GP, general purpose. And then GI started calling it Jeep.
During World War II, more than 500,000 were manufactured, and the Jeep took on a mythic status.
In many of the war films, when we were in Toledo growing up, when the Jeep came into the scene, everybody in the audience would applaud because, hey, we were doing our duty for World War II. To take Jeep out of Toledo would be like taking Sir Winston Churchill out of World War II. You can't do that. They were an integral part to winning the war.
This was just the beginning. The Jeep then had a starring role in other conflicts around the world and is fondly remembered by many old soldiers, including Jamie Farr, who played Corporal Max Klinger in the hit TV series MASH.
In MASH, I had the opportunity, as one of my ways to get out of the Army, to eat a Jeep.
Hi, Claire. How's it going?
I'm eating a Jeep.
Good.
Klinger was a very bizarre character, and he thought that would be a wonderful way to get out of the Army. I felt that it was cannibalistic. Here I am eating my own Jeep, I mean, out of Toledo, Ohio. We were both born there. So it's like a sibling to me, you know? I didn't want to eat the Jeep.
Oh, wow, right down.
Pop it in and let it slide down the gullet like a Blue Point oyster.
Colonel, he's crazy.
Boy, this still drives sweet. I bet you this could win another war.
Isn't life wonderful?
As the GIs left British shores for home, along with more than a few broken hearts, they left hundreds of their trusty Jeeps. One got into the hands of Maurice Wilkes, technical director at the Rover Car Company. He and his family had great fun with it. By 1947, he had realized that here was something that could transform rural Britain.
The horse is a reliable and willing worker, but he can't be here, there and everywhere, coping with the 101 odd jobs that crop up daily on the farm. What I want, says many a farmer, is something that can do everything the horse can do, plus a lot more, and at 3 times the speed.
So Rover took on the challenge of reinventing the Jeep for Britain's farmers, and in doing so gave birth to a legend.
And here it is, the Land Rover. A tough, chunky, cheeky, versatile vehicle with an unlimited capacity for hard work.
It came out in 1948. Farmers Stuart and Ruby Hibbard were still at school. Ruby's father was a local Rover dealer, and it all began when the bonnet was up.
We went down to Stuart's farm and we took a demonstration Land Rover down. And we actually broke down, and Stuart came to our rescue. He was, you know, little curly-haired boy, absolutely fascinated with the Land Rover. That was the first time that I'd met him.
It was the Land Rover that sparked their love affair.
I suppose we met through Land Rovers. I'm sure that's why he kept friendly with me at the time, so he could come and have a look at the Land Rovers before he had one of his own, you see.
Well, there were one or two other attractions.
Oh, hot diggity, dog diggity, boom, what you do to me, it's so new to me, what you do.
For farmers who could afford it, the Land Rover was an instant hit. What better way to get the cows in? But they weren't the only ones smitten by it. Very quickly it became another way to get to the fire on time, and the perfect vehicle to police the empire.
Where have you been all my life?
For Stuart and Ruby, it was more than just a car. Like hundreds of others, they discovered the Land Rover was the ultimate vehicle for off-road entertainment.
That's the first Land Rover rally you went into. In the first Land Rover that you ever had, before you could even legally drive, didn't you?
Yeah, that was.
And that was the beginning of it all, I think.
Stuart and Ruby became part of a cosy extended family, with the Rover Car Company its benevolent patron.
It was absolutely wonderful, and I mean, in due course, we got married. This is us on our wedding day. As you can see, it's a nice, smart, white Land Rover. We even had a present from Rovers for our wedding present, so it really was a Land Rover wedding.
As Ruby and Stuart's love blossomed, their Land Rover took on a character all of its own.
The Land Rover is like the type of man Britain's countryside has bred for centuries past. Strong and skillful, yet on social occasions, smart enough to hold his own with dignity and self-respect.
We were full of optimism. The whole world was opening up. And this was a machine that was going to take you into that whole new world.
Ziggity-boom. You women have heard of jalopies, you've heard the noise they make, but let me introduce my new Rocket 88.
This optimism spanned the Atlantic. The American car business was booming, producing all kinds of weird and wonderful new models. In comparison, the Jeep seemed outdated. The company that made it faced bankruptcy and were looking for a way out.
American Motors were approached by Jeep Corporation in Toledo, Ohio, and asked if we were interested in buying Jeep. My boss said, yeah, I'd like to buy Jeep, you know, without any study, without any due diligence, without any consultation of the rest of the management. Came back to me and he said, guess what, Jerry, we're going to buy Jeep. I'm not for it. Why not? He said, well, don't you understand that the Jeep organization is a rundown organization? But right after having bought it, I got excited because I saw the potential, and I said, there's something here.
American Motors also inherited a series of other Jeep products, which Gerald Myers was quick to exploit.
In the late 1950s, Jeep decided they wanted to move away from the utilitarian market and really broaden their appeal. So by 1962, they'd come up with a range of vehicles called the Wagoneer station wagons. Now, they were available in two-wheel drive, but also in four-wheel drive. They were the first SUVs, if you like, and they were a massive hit with American families.
People argue about what was the first SUV, and it seems to me, not from an engineering point of view perhaps, but certainly from a style point of view, it makes perfect sense to talk about Jeep's products as being proto-SUVs or paleo-SUVs or something like that.
So was the Jeep Wagoneer really the first SUV? The Americans certainly seem to think so. But if we look back into the mists of time, there's another contender. Out of the pre-SUV darkness came a vehicle designed and engineered, not in Ohio, but Solihull, home to a crack team of Britain's top auto visionaries. The engineering director, the project engineer, the design engineer, all responsible for bringing this to life in 1970.
We thought that there was an opportunity of making something with the abilities of a Land Rover, which was much more normal and comfortable on road.
We knew immediately that we were onto a winner here. It was just an exciting project, and it was taking Land Rover into a whole new ball game that we hadn't been into before. By the time we were building the #1 prototype, it was just great.
And what our boys in Solihull came up with took the four-wheel drive to a new level. Compared to any of Land Rover's previous models, this certainly was luxurious. And it came at a price. There was no way your average family could afford this.
I think it had a target price of £2,000, and I think I'm right in saying the sales department thought that we wouldn't sell any at all, because how could you possibly sell a Land Rover for nearly £2,000?
That's exactly right.
It was far too much.
It was only later on that we started to see the ideas forming that this was not only going to fulfill the role that we had seen for it, but it was going to start moving up market.
It was the British upper classes that turned the Range Rover into the first SUV. To the surprise of its creators, the Range Rover was transformed from off-roader to toff-roader.
The first prototypes were almost able to be cleaned up with a hose.
Oh yes. You could pressure wash the first ones out, but it wasn't long before people started saying to us, wouldn't it be nice to have some carpet over the tunnel? And then wouldn't it be nice to have carpet all over?
New trim and cubby box. Central radio tape deck, plus rear speakers. Standard in...
So it wasn't long before we were into a trim development program to put soft seats, carpets, and to make it quite a luxury vehicle. And if you put the price up, you can offer people all the extra options they were asking for.
Ah, the wondrously versatile Range Rover. Perfect for the highway.
The Range Rover was now being advertised as your passport into the British aristocracy.
It can give Jaguars a run for their money. And it's ideal for driving up to your country home.
In America, just as in Britain, four-wheel drives were beginning to catch on. Big cars were all the rage, and fuel was cheap. But something was about to happen that would change everything.
Until comparatively recent times, America produced all of its own oil. And so Americans became addicted and indeed expected that gasoline would be very cheap. And the public policy and the politics dictated that. That all came to a rather abrupt close in the 1970s.
The Israelis have jeeps and tanks holding this line every hour.
October 1973, the start of the Yom Kippur War. The Arab nations, angered by American support for Israel, united under the banner of OPEC and put an embargo on oil to the US. For the first time, world events hit Americans where it hurt.
The oil embargo of 1973 scared people because all of a sudden people said, well, they'd never thought about how much oil we were using and whether we would have access to oil and the prices. And the prices were just zooming up and causing tremendous inflation and fear. And so in 1975, the United States Congress passed a law for corporate average fuel economy, as it's called, CAFE.
The CAFE legislation forced the auto industry to produce cars that would do many more miles to the gallon. This was to ensure America would not be vulnerable to another oil crisis.
The average fuel economy in the early 1970s was somewhere between 13 and a half miles per gallon. The thrust of this legislation was to, within a decade, require that fuel economy to double to about 27 and a half miles a gallon.
This spelled disaster for the auto industry, and in particular, gas guzzlers like the new SUVs. For Gerald Myers, it felt like the beginning of the end for his beloved Jeeps.
We could see the Jeep was sunk. But there's no way we could get 27.5 miles a gallon on an SUV that weighed 4,000 pounds.
The auto industry now was regulated first for safety, then they were regulated for emissions, and now they're going to be regulated for fuel economy. They were infuriated. They hated this. They were just stunned.
I was devastated because I had to go home and tell the troops that this is the way it's going to be, and that I didn't know how to do it, and I knew they didn't know how to do it, but it had to be done.
The auto industry badly needed a loophole to get round the new regulations. They had to find a way to continue producing SUVs with their huge gas-guzzling engines. Eventually, they found the loophole that they were looking for. It centered on a question that sounds innocent enough. When is a car not a car, and a truck, not a truck.
I actually distinguished trucks from cars because there were very, very few trucks on the highways. They were pickup trucks on the farm, they were used for delivery purposes, but they weren't used by consumers.
Joan Claybrook introduced laws which exempted trucks from the new fuel regulations. In doing so, she unwittingly created the very loophole the auto industry were looking for.
What happened is that the auto industry, trying to figure out how to deal with all these regulatory things, they always try and figure out how they could maneuver around them. And they decided, well, they would put a sort of a fancy top on truck chassis.
Light trucks were largely pickup trucks, typically used by people in their work. This is what the carpenter used, this is what the plumber used, this is what small businessmen used. So it made sense to say, well, wait a minute, we're going to give them a little bit of a break. We're not going to drive up the price of their vehicles because they need them. So that was a perfectly sensible and reasonable exception at the time it was made. Did anyone see it as a major loophole? No.
The auto industry still had to convince the authorities that their SUVs were trucks, not cars. The car barons decided to flex their political muscle.
So we played the Washington card. I spent many, many days and hours in Washington selling the regulators, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Federal Transportation Department, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, congressmen. After a year or two, this began to have its mark.
They spent millions of dollars trying to convince Congress that their four-wheel drives were not cars at all. It was make or break time for the SUV.
What I finally did was convince them that Jeeps were trucks, which allowed us to escape many of the safety regulations and a whole lot of the environmental regulations. That breathed new life into the Jeep vehicle and meant that the vehicle had a future.
Freed from fuel restrictions, the industry began to pour millions into marketing SUVs. The adverts always focused on the image of the great outdoors.
When you buy these kinds of vehicles, they allow you to become the person you would like to be. SUVs fill the emotional gaps often that people have in their lives. It allows people to be seen as younger and more exciting, perhaps, than they really are.
Here it comes, one tough hombre, the four-wheel drive Jeep Cherokee. Some machine. But this one's special. This one's the Cherokee Jeep, with special stripes, sporty wheels, and big, I mean big, all-terrain tires.
Cherokee is a name that's derived from or taken from the U.S. American Indian Cherokee tribe. And we went down to the Cherokee tribe to ask their permission to put the Cherokee name on the vehicle. And they thought it was a wonderful idea.
Jeep Cherokee Jeep. Good name.
So we styled the new vehicle with that in mind. Rugged, country kind of thing.
These are USA.
Millions have bought into this rough, tough image, but there is something else that makes four-wheel drive so popular.
Safety's pretty important to us, but you know, any big car is going to provide you the same amount of safety.
I feel safer than in a small car if I were to get into a wreck. When you get hit or in an accident, there's more metal around you.
Despite the confidence of today's SUV drivers, there have been serious doubts over the safety of these vehicles. Questions were first raised when an American documentary investigated the stability of the Jeep CJ5.
I
I'm only going 8 to 10 miles an hour. But this is what can happen when the Jeep makes a J-turn at 22 miles an hour.
Over the next 2 decades, there were a series of lawsuits involving 4x4s rolling over. Some experts believe they are inherently unsafe.
As an engineer, I've investigated over 3,000 accidents, most of them involving sport utility vehicles. The problem is it's too narrow compared to its height. And so when the vehicle goes to the turn, it tips over.
SUVs have higher centers of gravity relative to the wheel tread. Those kinds of vehicles are subject to rollover. Not often, not commonly, not at low speeds, but you can make any vehicle roll over if you go around a curve at 80 miles an hour.
There's a sporty vehicle that offers you so much variety.
But one vehicle did raise concerns about rollover at much lower speeds. Ford's SUV, the Bronco 2, released to the public in 1983.
Even when they first started making the Bronco 2, the engineers realized the danger to the passengers and the occupants that these vehicles presented. And they asked that management authorize them to make the vehicles wider and to lower the center of gravity. That has the effect of making it more difficult for the vehicle to roll.
Despite the concerns raised by their own engineers, Ford pressed ahead with a new model.
The 90s are here, and so is a way to explore new horizons.
They named their new four-door SUV the Ford Explorer, and it became the best-selling four-wheel drive in the world. But it hadn't been widened, and it had the same problems as the Bronco.
I believe the engineers wanted to make it safe, but they felt like that their hands were tied, that even though they were to speak out, it would not be heard. The whole company together wouldn't bite the bullet and widen it out sufficiently to eliminate the problem.
In the 1990s, SUV rollovers across all brands killed 12,000 people in America, at a time when road fatalities were dropping.
It's amazing, but it's always the same response, which was, we have a date where we have to get this vehicle on the road. We're not going to do it because we have to meet that date. And they would say things to placate the engineers like, but what we'll do is we'll make these changes later on, next year or the year after. And they never do, because the changes cost money. And when it really comes down to it, what you're doing here is you're exchanging dollars for human lives.
I buy the Ford Explorer because I have 2 kids, my wife and me. It's bigger car, it's safety car, it's for family. It's the safety for the children, your family, everybody. You gotta be happy with this car.
But for the Gozukaras, their Ford Explorer was to prove anything but safe. In 1997, they were driving to Las Vegas to celebrate their wedding anniversary.
I take the freeway. I started braking a little bit, but my car, he started shaking. It started moving, shaking, after rollover. I don't remember how many the rollover I have because I have my wife, me, 3 kids in the car.
In a rollover, the vehicle actually spins 1 complete revolution in 1 second, and then is smashing across the freeway. They were thrown out in various directions. Catherine had her spinal cord snapped instantly. Agop lay on the pavement hundreds of yards away from her with his legs crushed. And it all happened on a freeway in the middle of the day at ordinary speeds when he was trying to control the car. I mean, it's really a shocking event. It happens in seconds. The effects last a lifetime.
This happened, destroyed my life, my family too, because everything is different.
The court awarded around $15 million to the Gozukaras. Ford, though, were found not to be directly responsible and paid no damages. However, the jury did find that the Ford Explorer was defective by design and vulnerable to rollover.
I don't believe that the auto manufacturers, particularly with the sport utility vehicles, have done enough to prevent vehicles overturning. We're not talking about a lot of widening. It doesn't have to be this unsafe.
But the Ford Explorer was to face another setback. This time, it was the tires.
This is the Firestone Radial ATX tire. It's an all-terrain tire that Ford and Firestone together built to go exclusively on the Ford Explorer.
Ford and Firestone, of course, worked together and have worked together as partners. The families were intertwined from early in the history of the automobile. So Ford and Firestone were in the design together, not only the tire, but the combination of the tire and the vehicle.
The folks at Ford wanted the Explorer to look like it was a real off-road vehicle, which is a joke. 95% of the Explorers never see any off-road use at all. They want that tire to look like it's an off-road, beefy, big kind of tire.
Ford had tried to improve stability by lowering the pressure in some of the tires.
They took it down 10 pounds per square inch, which is a lot, from 35 to 26 pounds per square inch, way below what Firestone recommended. And then what happened is when you went at high speeds for 4 or 5 hours on a trip, the tires overheated, and then you had the tire detread.
What we have here is the tread came off and it would start to separate right here on the shoulder of the tire, where they would have these deep ridges, part of the macho look that the two companies wanted to present to the public. The problem was that inside the tire, where you would never see it if you were a driver, a separation would start to propagate and occur. And then in a moment, when you would never see it coming, the tread would come off. And then when the tread would come off, you would be riding on the freeway on this, and this is not going to be the same as your tire. You're skating. And so the problems in the design of the Ford Explorer and this tire all of a sudden come together and make it almost impossible for somebody to keep control.
The tires were a disaster. After a series of fatal accidents, Ford paid millions of dollars in confidential out-of-court settlements. But in 1998, one case went public.
A Ford Explorer and a Firestone Radial ATX tire with what's called a tread separation. That's when this tread literally peels off the tire.
Ford and Firestone were forced to recall more than 6 million tires. But it didn't end there.
Then Ford and Firestone got into a huge fight over which was worse, the Ford or the tires, the Firestone tires. And it was a huge brouhaha. I've never seen two major manufacturers have such a brutal fight.
Who done it? Everyone in the room looks shady.
This is a tire problem, not a vehicle problem.
Mr. Chairman, I must say, and this is not easy for me to say as well, but there is something wrong with the Ford Explorer.
The Ford-Firestone scandal came to a head at a congressional hearing in June 2001.
We have a corporate schoolyard brawl that's broken out here. We have two corporations, each of which has leveled a blistering, scalding indictment of the other company.
Somebody took my baby.
It emerged that both companies had withheld information relating to safety. Firestone shouldered most of the blame.
Help me find those two.
In October 2001, a government inquiry reported that it had not yet found any evidence against the Ford Explorer. Ford have now widened the 2002 model of their Explorer by 2 inches, just as their engineers had suggested.
It's taken Ford almost 20 years to widen the vehicle slightly. There's no reason why they couldn't have done that earlier.
The Ford-Firestone debacle, in my view, was the turning point. It was a turning point in the education of the American public about how these vehicles performed, because there was so much television about it. And the whole issue of covering it up, of lying to the government, of secret settlements, of bullying the Department of Transportation, all of this became public. And I think that's why manufacturers are now redesigning their SUVs, making them much safer.
Today, these vehicles have shaken off a troubled past. Here in the UK, they are more popular than ever.
It's quite amusing that a vehicle that started off as such a macho vehicle, carrying troops and, ferrying farmers across their land, is now so popular with females. You see it in Chelsea, the Cheshire Wives drive it, it's at the school gate.
All these posh mums using them for the school run. Where do their kids go to school? Beirut? Come on! What do you need a bulletproof 20-foot tank to take your kids to school with? What's wrong with a Vauxhall Corsa?
It's a stylish looking car. It's a car that I wanted.
Great. You can see where I'm going. My husband, he has a saloon car, so I have this.
A lot of women want to drive a car that looks good. It's almost become the ultimate fashion accessory. You've got your Jimmy Choo shoes and the latest Gucci handbag, and your 4x4 is the ultimate accessory.
The kind of people that are buying these 4x4s today are successful, affluent, would like something safe, different to look at, nice to use, great to be seen in. We have a Lincoln Blackwood here, and this is the ultimate shopping trolley for the lady with everything. Even the tailgate area is fitted out probably better than a lot of people's lounges. Doors open, very easy load, great for a Rodeo drive, and Saks Fifth Avenue. Special compartment for your credit cards and jewellery. Aspreys, little bits will move nicely in there. Bond Street, Rodeo Drive. This one even has fully air-conditioned seats in it. £45,000 with all that equipment must be considered a real great piece of kit. You won't see many of these very often. Who wouldn't be delighted to go home in that?
Even in Britain, the luxury 4x4 is rapidly becoming a victim of its own success.
I do get a little bit cross sometimes when I see them all over the road and taking up all the space, and I think that they're not really, they're not essential for everybody, are they?
Essential or not, more than 2.5 million are now registered in the UK, and they're anything but cheap, costing up to £70,000 for a top-of-the-range luxury SUV.
Hans Place SW1. So we've got two BMW X5s, a Range Rover, a Jeep, another Jeep. We've got a Land Rover Discovery on the right. Now, this is central London. We're miles away from the nearest mud-filled ditch. Yet people who are living here, and we've got another Mercedes on the left, another BMW X5, another BMW X5, they're breathing, they're everywhere. People here feel that they need them, yet they're stuck in the middle of one of the biggest cities on the planet.
It doesn't go off-road very often, but I'm sure 90% of people who own them would say that.
These are the kind of vehicles that you need to survive in SW1, because you never know, oh, another BMW X5, you never know when you're going to get stuck in mud or someone's going to knock on your door and say, I'm sorry, I've driven off the road and I'm in a ditch. A Land Rover, you're going to have to pull them out. It's hardcore. This is what it's like living in a frontier society in SW1. I'm only jealous.
And if you really want to make the neighbours jealous, you could try this effort from Cadillac. It was aimed at their traditional upmarket clientele.
The 2002 Cadillac Escalade was intended for a very upscale group of customers. Fairly affluent household incomes of $150,000, people who are between 40 to 55 years old, well educated, older people with lots of money.
But sometimes the advertisers just get it wrong.
We drop O's on them, drop O's on them when we drop O's on them, drop O's on them when we
Cars have always been in the rap game, but particularly now, it's like you said, it's definitely a big subject of a lot of rhymes. A lot of artists be talking about it, and that's because there's a lot of hot cars out there. A lot of the artists are jumping into real nice cars.
Cadillac grills, Cadillac mills, check out the oil my Cadillac spills.
Cars are the new jewelry. You know, originally it was Run DMC with the gold rope chains. After that, you know, in the era of Biggie, he went on to having the diamonds, the real bling. I think now there's so much money in the rap game, it's gone from jewelry to cars. And when people are rhyming about their cars, you know, people are talking about how hot they are. You know, like the prestige, the status.
High class, anything goes. Catch them in the club throwing pretty bows.
These SUVs appeal to the rappers because they're expensive. That's the only reason. Rappers are very ostentatious. It's all about showing how much money they're earning.
All my players in the house that can bar on a 20-inch rim with the candy car.
For the Escalade, this was something that was unexpected and something, quite frankly, that happens to be a real winner for us in the marketplace, because right now we've got people who are in their late teens and in their 20s who happen to think Escalade is a really hot vehicle.
I feel the Escalade has really just fallen off now. He's been in a lot of rap videos, as I say, it's been in a lot of rhymes, a lot of records have talked about it. People ain't really rocking that. It's really moved on now.
One way to enhance the tough street image of a four-wheel drive is to fit bull bars. They originated in Australia to protect vehicles from kangaroos in the outback. But for pedestrians, they can prove fatal.
It's the last day of term, July '95. Helen and Elizabeth came home on the school bus. Helen was 10. Her little sister Elizabeth was 6 at the time. They got off the bus, and I don't know whether it was excitement, last day of term, or they just ran across the road. There was a Land Rover Discovery coming up the road with bull bars on. And it just hit Helen. She's quite a tall girl for 10, and the bars hit her in the chest. She survived 6 days in intensive care and died on the 6th day.
Imagine for a moment that you are in collision, you're hit by a vehicle. Now, the front of the vehicle will spread your impact across the whole of the front of the vehicle. And when your head hits the bonnet, the likelihood is that the bonnet will give way under your head. It's going to hurt, but there will be some cushioning effect. The problem is that the bull bars do exactly the opposite. This bar doesn't spread the load, it concentrates the load. It concentrates it along the length of the bar and a small area of your head or your chest or your leg. It's like being attacked by Mike Tyson wielding a scaffolding bar.
I mean, the driver wasn't speeding, he wasn't drunk. He just had bull bars on his vehicle. I found out later at the inquest that he bought the car with them on, and he never gave them a thought. He didn't think about these accessories on his car, they were there when he bought the car. He didn't know what he had on his vehicle, how dangerous they could be.
Bull bars. The British government says it wants them banned. The European Commission says it wants them banned. And even the Queen is taking action against them. But more and more are being fitted to cars, 500,000 at the last count. The safety experts predict they'll cause an extra 35 pedestrian deaths next year.
Despite the outcry in the mid-90s, bull bars are still a common sight on Britain's roads.
In the last 18 months to 2 years, we've actually seen the European Commission become involved. They have struck an agreement with European motor manufacturers that they, the motor manufacturers, will not make or fit bull bars on their vehicles. The problem, of course, is that although the motor manufacturers won't, the private manufacturers will. So you can still buy your four-wheel drive, take it round the corner to a dealer under the arches who will fit us a set of metallic bull bars. And there is nothing illegal about that. Bull bars, like the ones in front of me in the United Kingdom, are neither use nor ornament, and I would like to see them banned and done away with.
Helen's accident was 7.5 years ago. The coroner then said that he thought they should be banned, and he was expecting or hoping for legislation in the near future. Why is it taking so long?
Sunday in Beverly Hills, at home with the SUV. But not everything in the garden is quite so rosy.
I stopped by this morning to let you know that as God's children, you have a responsibility to take care of that which God has blessed you with. And if others won't do it, it's up to you to take a stand and stand for what is right.
The evils of the SUV have even made it to the Sunday sermon.
We have SUVs, the super trucks. They're nothing but gas guzzlers.
Others are taken to the streets of Los Angeles to corner those you won't find in church. Earth on Empty are an environmental pressure group campaigning across the USA.
This is some information on SUVs and the kind of emissions that SUVs put out into the community, and it talks a little bit about your choice.
What does that have to do with the church? Because of the fact that when you leave here today, some of y'all are going to get in your big SUVs and continue to pollute the air. I want to breathe and I want to live. Can I get a witness up in here?
Would you leave your color television turned on for 28 years, or your bathroom light burning for 30? That's what we're doing when we drive SUVs. We're wondering if you'd be willing to read it.
No thanks. I've actually got about an hour for the kids to have fun. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, have fun.
But the SUV also has a passionate following. Now the battle has even hit the airwaves.
AM 640.
John Ken Show, John Cobelt and Ken Champeau, 434 on KFI. Coming up in just a minute, you'll want to hear this. We're going to talk to the Reverend Jim Ball. He says no way would Jesus ever drive an SUV, so that means you shouldn't be driving one either.
Talk about raising their families, making sure their kids, stay away from drugs and all the bad temptations and the evils that the church has talked about for, thousands of years, and now all of a sudden...
They're not moral because they drive an SUV. Mitch and Yorba Linda, you're on the John and Ken Show.
My wife and I have 3 kids, and if we want to go someplace with friends or family, we're able to do it in one vehicle. We don't have to take 2 or 3 vehicles. So in my opinion, we're conserving energy, and we're saving gas, and we're cutting down on traffic.
Now these are exactly the kind of vehicles that we are against. There's a giant truck-like vehicle. These people have come to the beach. There's no snow anywhere. There's nowhere near the mountains. It's obviously a gas guzzler. This is a car that is very expensive. It belongs to an educated elite.
These people hate SUVs. They're socialists. There's a lot of socialists in America. They don't like rich people who drive big cars, or even middle-class people who drive big cars.
They've chosen, for style reasons mostly, to drive this giant gas guzzler, which we find to be really offensive and unacceptable.
These are people who go around parking lots and slapping on ugly bumper stickers saying you're being a pig for driving an SUV. That's not a scientific argument. That's, I don't like what you have because you have more than I do.
Now, wouldn't you be irritated if your neighbor had one of these and you couldn't get in and out of your car once he parked next to you?
It's also about parking spaces. It's about room on the freeway. It's about people who feel like you are taking up too much resources, too much space. But I believe that people have the freedom to choose.
There are millions of people who, when they see SUV, it makes them mad because they see it as a gas-guzzling, somewhat threatening vehicle.
I don't feel like the danger is in SUVs. The danger is in the driver.
Pretty soon, people will have to drive buses or dump trucks.
If you're in a tiny little car, I understand why you'd be scared of an SUV. So my answer to that is get your own SUV. But why should I be less safe because you're less safe? I don't think they're so much worried about the environment. I think what it is they want to take away people's SUVs because it annoys them.
Now, though, this ongoing battle has become even more political.
Now, I'm just as democratic and patriotic as anybody, but let's bring it on down. Bottom line is, we are consuming oil at a faster rate than we're producing. But you need to understand that the need for oil is fueling the flames of war, because you gotta get it from somewhere, and we don't have it here. Come on, somebody.
A pressure group, including Hollywood producers, actors and agents, has found a new reason to hate the SUV. They claim it is linked to global terrorism.
This is George. This is the gas that George bought for his SUV. This is the oil company executive who sold the gas that George bought for his SUV. These are the countries where the executive bought the oil that made the gas that George bought for his SUV. And these are the terrorists who get money from those countries every time George fills up his SUV.
Whether or not the SUV is fueling global terrorism, it is clear that this troubled vehicle is here to stay.
SUVs have changed the DNA of automotive evolution. What they've done is change people's expectations now. So future vehicles that are being developed must deliver what SUVs have delivered to people in the past. What you see in vehicles now is various crosses and combinations that are trying to develop some of the benefits that SUVs have, and the combinations, the right combinations that people are seeking.
The popularity of these vehicles has now drawn every major car maker into the market.
I can't see the popularity of the SUV fading at all. I mean, if most manufacturers have already got one, and if they haven't, they've got one planned. You've got the VW Touareg, which is Volkswagen's first 4x4 arriving. Porsche even have come up with the Cayenne. Love it or hate it, they've got an SUV. I mean, I just hope that I never see the day when the wraps are pulled off the Ferrari 4x4. Then I will know that this craze that we have, this love about SUVs, will have gone too far.
But one manufacturer has waited longer than most before dipping its toe into the water.
Why didn't we go in before 2002? Well, actually, we had some question mark about how would a car like this, an SUV, fit in to the Volvo brand. So we looked at the disadvantages about the SUV segment, and we found safety aspects, rollover accidents, for instance, in US, to a very large number, bad characteristics when it comes to handling, braking, comfort, environmental reasons, high fuel consumption, emission levels. Of course, safety is one of the biggest hinders why we didn't make it earlier. So what we did is we made a setup from a passenger car point of view. Long wheelbase, wide track, low center of gravity, which means that we put all the heavy stuff as low as possible, still achieving ground clearance and things like that, which is mandatory to be able to call it an SUV, and by that certify it as a light truck in US.
Countdown initiated.
Today, car makers are investing millions in the latest technology, just to make SUVs as safe as an ordinary family car.
So where will the SUV go? Well, we're already beginning, I think, to see the signs of where it may go. As if we see the SUV essentially downsize on the one hand and become more car-like on the other, then a lot of what we're talking about today, from the safety problems to the environmental problems, become much less of a concern.
But not all SUVs are getting smaller. For some of us, size does matter. And in the automotive arms race, there is a new front-runner. Born out of warfare and a potent symbol of US military might, it is a vehicle to appeal to all our baser instincts.
This is the new H2 Hummer. This is the latest must-have. If I can show you around it a little bit. This particular one has a 6-litre V8, permanent 4-wheel drive, fuel injected, very smooth and very powerful. This is the latest must-have for footballers, footballers' wives, musicians, pop stars and very successful businessmen. They like this very much in-your-face styling. And they realise how sophisticated they are, how tough they are. It certainly makes an impact if you see this on the street coming towards you. Many of the clients with this have already got a Bentley or aboard with it. Range Rovers, they've had 10. Mercedes, they've tried. The X5 BMW, they've tried. This is it. And you're going to see it again in the Gulf very shortly on another job.
The more concerned people are about world events, the more they look for items of security, some kind of emotional security blanket. A 4x4 or a sports utility vehicle will work as a really good security blanket.
I felt like I was really an incarnation of Dr. Frankenstein, because as the SUVs became akin to truck-sized vehicles as opposed to these cute little nimble off-road vehicles, the monster began to take shape. And this monster, I believe, got out of control.
The popularity in SUVs in general can be linked to how we feel about what's happening in society. And I think any kind of conflict that's going on in the world, I think you want to feel protected. And a great way to feel protected is in a big armoured vehicle.
"50 years from now, we'll laugh at the SUV. But we're going to just smile at these people way back there in these Goliath vehicles, and we'll just laugh at where we were